The children ate dinner and went to their rooms. Claire and Thomas were alone in the kitchen, but even then Claire did not want to tell her husband the good news. She decided to tell him only after Thomas asked her why she was so happy. "You're glowing with happiness," Thomas said wryly as he proceeded with a second serving of very spicy and very thick soup. "Why should I be all of a sudden? I don't understand." Claire replied cryptically, "It's raining and snowing outside. The wind is knocking it down. The kids aren't doing well in school. There's no telling what they'll be when they grow up. I can barely stand on my feet," Thomas said gloomily. "I work an hour and a half on the subway there and an hour and a half back across the Capitol. 8 hours there, I work like an ox. I'm tired as a horse, I'm all gray, and I've never seen anything but work in my life. And you have a reason to have fun. Where does she get her strength from?" thought Thomas angrily. "She goes to work every day, just like me. Maybe she doesn't do anything there. No, she probably does something. She even gets paid more than I do. That's not why she gets paid that kind of money. She works not only at her job, but also around the house, and still manages to be happy. How can that be?" Claire smiled to herself as she remembered the promotion she had received. She realized how much it meant to their family, but she also knew how Thomas might react to it. The sense of rivalry between them had always been a problem. She sighed, realizing this conversation wasn't going to be easy. "I have good news, Thomas," Claire said. "That's why I'm happy. One piece of news is very good, and the second piece of news is good too." With a start, Thomas ate his soup and listened to his wife, becoming more and more convinced that there were many injustices in life. Why is it that when I'm in a bad mood, my wife is sure to ruin it for me? And why can't she find another time to give me good news, over a meal? Thomas was always dissatisfied with something, either other people or life in general. He carried that feeling through life and didn't squander a drop of it. On the contrary, it had intensified, and now his dissatisfaction with life and anger at other people was much stronger and sharper than before. Thomas first experienced this feeling in kindergarten. Then there was school and dissatisfaction with classmates after school, university and negative attitude towards fellow students after university, problems with colleagues. Thomas did not stop and began to ruin his relationship with his wife. Relations with his wife were spoiled not immediately, but only after Thomas realized that, although she did not have a higher education, she could know even more than he did. The relationship with his children also soured when he realized that they looked at the world differently than he did. And now when his wife said she had good news, Thomas felt a strong attack of jealousy. "How is this possible? I honestly don't understand," Thomas thought. "She earns more than me, does everything around the house, has time to make soup, and cooks deliciously. She even keeps the house in order. Everything's cleaned up, everything's washed, and she can tell me the good news. Is she laughing at me or something?" Claire watched the expression on Thomas's face as he sank into his thoughts. She could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes. She wanted to reach out to him, to let him know that her success didn't mean his failure. But she also knew he was struggling with his own insecurities, and it was making him lose his temper. "Congratulations," Thomas said quietly, frowning and staring at his plate. "And what's the good news then?" "How can you have the nerve to ask me what news to start with, just good news or really good news? And then they wonder why marriages are so short-lived, and how can they be long-lasting? How much stamina, how much patience a man must have to endure such strain." "Start with just the good stuff," Thomas said, hiding his excitement. "I've been promoted at work," Claire said. "I'm now the director of our branch. The salary is 4 times as much." "No," Thomas thought, "she's not laughing. She's just mocking me. A director. She doesn't even have a college degree. God, where is this world going? This is what she calls good news." Thomas felt a rush of emotion. He remembered all the times he'd worked late, felt unappreciated, felt stuck. And now here was Claire moving forward, achieving what he could never achieve. He felt ashamed of his bitterness, but he couldn't help it. "We're having another baby," Claire said, "and it's a boy again. Funny, brave, kind, smart. Tell me, are you happy?" Thomas had no time to say anything before the other two sons came running into the kitchen. "Mommy, can we go for a walk?" The children shouted in one voice. Claire looked at her husband. "If Daddy doesn't mind, then go," Claire said sternly. "I don't mind," the sons shouted happily, ignoring their father and running out into the yard for a walk. "To be home by 10 o'clock," Claire shouted after them. She looked at her husband and smiled. "What do you think of my news, Thomas? Tell me you're glad." "Yes, I am glad. I am glad. I am glad," Thomas replied, barely holding back tears. "I'm overreacting, of course. But only this time I'm going to find another woman, one I won't be jealous of. I think that will be the best revenge. I'll trade her for another woman, one who isn't good at all." Thomas imagined it and felt so much better at the mere thought of having a pathetic, defenseless creature who would look upon him as a god. Thomas realized he had solved this difficult problem. "I'll wait until she gives birth and goes on maternity leave, and then I'll start my revenge," he thought. "She'll be busy with the baby, and I'll have at least a year to find someone else for everyone to be jealous of me." But what happened was that Thomas didn't have time to trade his wife for another woman. Meeting his wife in the hospital after giving birth, Thomas was once again convinced of the unfairness of this world, that some people are given everything and others, like him, nothing. "This time, Thomas," said Claire, "I'm not going on maternity leave." "What?" marveled Thomas. "And who's going to babysit?" "You, Thomas, will be babysitting our baby," said Claire. "It is necessary. It's best for all of us." Thomas stared at her, trying to comprehend her words. He pictured himself at home, caring for a newborn while his wife worked as principal. He didn't know if he could do it, and the thought horrified him. He had always defined himself by his job, no matter how flawed it was. "What about my job?" asked Thomas. "After all, I've already found someone weak and defenseless," Thomas thought, "who will surely look up to me." "I've wanted to talk to you about your work for a long time," said Claire. "Well, why do you go to your job if you don't like it, aren't interested in it, and so you're disrespected and underpaid there? Holding on to it like sending you on vacation instead of me is a good way out. You get to leave a hated environment and get paid for it. I can imagine how envious everyone will be of you." Thomas felt a growing sense of unease mixed with a strange curiosity. He imagined what his life might be like if he stayed home with the baby. He imagined waking up early in the morning, not to take the subway, but to nurse his newborn, to feed him, to rock him to sleep. It was a foreign concept, but there was something about it that almost appealed to him. "I'm surprised," Thomas said. "And who would envy me?" "Everyone," Claire replied confidently. "You don't envy anyone, do you? You'd be the smartest of them all. Just think about it. 6 a.m., the street, the wind, the wet snow, the ice, the poor lighting, the grim faces of passers-by walking to the subway. They have so many challenges to overcome. And have you ask, will you have no difficulties?" "I'm the director now, Thomas. The car will pull right up to the entrance," Claire replied, "and you will take the subway to work." "Yes," Thomas agreed sadly. "I take the subway for an hour and a half, and on the subway, remember what they do. Everybody gets mad. No one will give you a seat because everyone's nervous. Everyone goes to work in the morning and comes back in the evening." Claire watched Thomas's reaction carefully. She knew the idea was giving him a hard time. She could see the apprehension in his eyes and knew it would take time for him to come to terms with what she was demanding of him. But she also believed that this change could be good for both of them. "And why is that?" said Thomas finally, breaking the silence. "Because not everyone is as happy as you are, Thomas. You can afford to be. You were born, and according to the law, you have the right to sit with him. Imagine everyone's wet and cold, and you're at home all the time. You want to sleep, you want to eat, you want to watch TV, you want to go out. Life is a fairy tale, and they pay money for it. Claire grinned. What's there to care about? He's just a little baby lying in his crib, not bothering anyone. You feed him a few times, take him out for a walk, and he's happy. You don't need anything special. I'll teach you everything, show you everything. Thomas felt stunned. He looked around the kitchen, the empty bowls, Claire's calm demeanor. He thought of his own frustrations and how they had built up over the years. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe he needed a change, something to shake up his routine. The thought of staying home and caring for the baby terrified him, but maybe it was time to do something different, to step out of his comfort zone. The following weeks passed in anxiety and preparation. Thomas reluctantly tendered his resignation at work. His coworkers were surprised, and some even congratulated him on such a brave decision. He tried to make a brave face, but deep down he felt fear and uncertainty. He gathered his things from the office, saying goodbye to the place that had been his refuge, albeit miserable, for many years. When he got home, Claire was waiting for him there, her face glowing with pride. "It won't be easy," Thomas said slowly, "but maybe you're right. Maybe I do need this. Maybe I need to look at things differently." Claire smiled at him, her eyes softening. "You won't be alone, Thomas. I'm going to help you. We'll figure this out together." Thomas took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to think that change could be good. Maybe this was the beginning of something better for both of them. Over the next few weeks, Claire taught Thomas everything he needed to know about caring for a newborn. She showed him how to hold the baby in his arms, how to change diapers, how to warm milk, and how to soothe the baby when he cried. At first, Thomas felt clumsy and awkward, but gradually he began to get the hang of it. The baby seemed to like him, and Thomas began to smile more often. The first morning that Claire left for work, Thomas stood at the window, holding their newborn son in his arms, and watched Claire get into the car that had come to pick her up. He waved at her, and she kissed him before the car pulled away. Thomas looked at the baby, who was looking at him with wide, curious eyes. "Well, little one," Thomas said softly, "it's just you and me today. Let's see if we can figure this out together." The day passed slowly, but not as badly as Thomas had feared. He fed the baby, changed his diapers, and even managed to get him to take a nap. During the nap, Thomas sat down on the couch, feeling a strange sense of peace. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't stressing about work, worrying about his boss, or feeling the weight of his own insecurities. Instead, he was simply here in the present moment with his son. When Claire returned home that evening, she found Thomas and the baby on the floor, surrounded by toys. Thomas was making silly faces and the baby was laughing, and that sweet, innocent sound filled the room. Claire's heart sank with love as she watched them. She knew it was the right decision. She knew Thomas needed this time not only to bond with his son, but to heal from years of frustration and bitterness. "Looks like you two had a good day," Claire smiled, setting her bag on the floor. Thomas looked up, a genuine smile appearing on his face. "Yes, it was. I think I might be able to make it." Claire knelt down beside them, kissed Thomas on the cheek, and then kissed their son on the forehead. "I never doubted it for a second," she whispered. And as the three of them sat there, Thomas realized that perhaps his life was finally making sense. The anger and jealousy he carried around for so long seemed to fade away, replaced by something new, something warm and reassuring. He looked at Claire, at their son, and realized he was exactly where he should be. Change was scary, but it was necessary. And now, as he hugged his son and felt Claire's hand on his shoulder, Thomas realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a better future. "I love you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Claire smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I love you too, Thomas, and I always will." They sat together, surrounded by toys and laughter, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt truly, deeply happy.